When I bet, I like getting something back, even if I lose. That's why I bet with Fanatics Sportsbook. When I bet with them, I earn fan cash, win or lose, and I can flip fan cash into bonus bets or use it for new Knicks apparel at Fanatics.com. Download the Fanatics Sportsbook app and let the fan cash flow. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Connecticut residents call 888-789-7777. Massachusetts residents call 800-327-5050. New York residents call 877-8-HOPE-NY. Maryland residents visit mdgamblinghelp.org.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition, the latest edition, an off-season edition of the X's and O's podcast, presented by Fanatics Sportsbook, of course. Our dear friend Deidre, we missed you at Fanatics Fest. We had a good time. The folks at Fanatics showed us a great time. You got to come next year.
I have to. I had severe FOMO. Severe.
Yeah, it was
I will make it out there for next. Yeah,
I got my Devin Booker Funko Pop behind me. For those watching on the tube, that's my prize. Anyway,
for what? What'd you do? I didn't hear about this.
Oh, you didn't know? No, you didn't hear?
No, I didn't. I didn't catch it.
Nobody posted about it on the
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, yes. Still living on a high for my victory over there. You hear TJ's voice. That is the defender of Julius, of course, the doctor of jump shots, the detail junkie, and dare I say, is he the dissector of Jordan? Clarkson? We'll get into that soon, but first, we got the latest and greatest news today. Has anyone said that Mike Brown has agreed to become the coach? Because the phraseology that I've seen is that the Knicks have offered the job to Mike Brown. I don't know if they've come to a contract yet. It would be awkward if everybody's been talking about this as if it's done and it's not done. But I'm going to assume that it is done. And so we are here to, at least at the beginning, talk about the latest news. That being that we have a new head coach, folks. After much panic, much chagrin. Do they have a plan? Do they not have a plan? I don't know if they had a plan, but I do know that they now have a coach. They've signed their free agents. We can start with the coach. Teacher, what are your thoughts about Mike Brown, the new head coach of the New York Knicks?
Yeah, so I chagrined a few times over the past couple of weeks. I am happy to put this moment in time past us and get to a spot where we can judge this move. You know, when Mike Brown's name first got mentioned, I think I had a similar reaction to a lot of Knicks fans of like, really, is he the guy that you want to fire Tom Thibodeau for? Is he going to elicit excitement in the fan base? But then the more I thought about it, knowing what this franchise, I think we both tweeted about this as well, about the need to have a voice, a spokesman for the organization. It felt like Mike Brown just was and is the right coach for this moment. Yeah, I think he presents a lot of things that are just going to be very different than how Tom Thibodeau operated, but he's got a real track record, some legitimate success. He's won a lot of basketball games. He's played in a lot of different and coached in a lot of different styles, coached under some legendary coaches. You know, you can't quibble with the resume, and it just, the fact of the matter is the amount of coaches available to the Knicks was clearly limited, and this feels like the right hire at this point. And I think he can really elicit a lot of value out of this team and maybe raise the ceiling a little bit. And I think that's where I am right now. What do you think?
Yeah. To start and like compare him to, I think, who was the second candidate maybe in Taylor Jenkins. And you compare those two in terms of their experience and their resume, and it's just not really close. And that's not to say that Mike Brown's a better coach than Taylor Jenkins. I can't say with confidence that he is. I'm not sure if he is. I don't know how anyone can be sure. Coaching.
Benjy, I'm not sure he's a better coach than Tom Thibodeau. I just think he might be the right coach for this team.
Right. That's a good point. It's hard. It's hard as much as we want to say decisively who is better than who as a coach. I think it's a very hard thing to do unless, and even when a coach takes over for another coach, that doesn't make it that much easier to do. There are some obvious examples of coaches coming in and totally changing everything and doing obvious things that change the trajectory of a franchise. Those are few and far between. Like, coaching is a hard thing to analyze. It will always be a hard thing to analyze. We only have access to what we have access to. But when you compare the experience, and I think it's relevant to compare experience here because New York is New York. This team is a veteran team with some tricky dynamics. There's no question about that. There's some tricky dynamics going on, not just in terms of the personnel themselves and how they mesh, whether they mesh, but in terms of, it sounds like Rick Brunson's hanging out on staff. It is a complicated structure over there at MSG right now, with the owner increasingly involved, terrifyingly so. And Mike Brown coached LeBron James, one of the highest maintenance players that exist on planet Earth, if not the highest maintenance player in terms of a coach and what he has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. He dealt with early career LeBron James. He's coached in LA. He's coached as an assistant in the highly pressurized, interesting situation, Golden State. And then he comes to Sacramento. And I think it's fair to judge Sacramento as like, that's who he is as a coach. That's the latest example of him as a head coach. And he transformed that team into a really exciting, fun team. Now that's where you could compare Jenkins to Brown. Is like Jenkins did a similar thing in Memphis to even a higher degree of success, but I think he had more talent. But Taylor Jenkins is only coached in Memphis. And that's the smallest market in the league. And that locker room, is it his fault? I don't know, but certainly that locker room had many issues. He didn't control the locker room. And so before we get into any X's and O's, despite the title of this podcast, I would say I feel more comfortable having someone with much more relevant experience for a big market, highly pressurized situation that he's stepping into than I would have Taylor Jenkins. I would have worried that this would have been big for Taylor Jenkins. The scrutiny, the pressure, I just don't know. And I'm confident that Mike Brown can handle that part. And the X's and O's front, like, yeah, man, like that offense in Sacramento was really fun and really interesting and run through a big man and with pace. He's not going to play that exact style with New York. I don't think it's conducive. The roster's quite conducive to that. But the whole point of this, to me, is to try to introduce some of those concepts, some of that dynamism into a ball control offense that the Knicks have employed over the last 5 years to a lot of success. But it is, what I would call a ball control offense. And to get to the next level, the franchise decided they needed some more. I think Mike Brown has proven the ability to, to launch an offense into a different state. And I think that's good. And I'm hoping he can do that here. So that's the first thing I'll say. I mean, there's a lot to talk about Exos, just the offensive side, DJ. Anything that stood out to you from that Sacramento team or prior iterations of Mike Brown teams that you think might be incorporated onto this Knicks roster?
Yeah, well, he in prior, stops, coaching under Steve Kerr, if you watch how the Kings ran offense, there were elements of the Warriors offense, the split cuts, a lot of that motion stuff, the strong actions. That's Popovich, that's Kerr. So he has like little bits and pieces of like all these coaches that he has been involved with. And you mentioned playing through a big. Now, this to me is the question hanging over how I view this acquisition of this head coach is his feelings on Karl-Anthony Towns. Because if you're going to try to, in some ways, maybe not like you pointed out, you can't replicate that Kings offense. I don't know if you want to replicate it to the T, but if you're going to try to do it in some way, shape, or form, doesn't Karl-Anthony Towns have to be your 5? Because there's a report out today, I think Ian Begley had it, about the Knicks, someone in the front office viewing the Mitchell Robinson, Karl-Anthony Towns pairing as the preferable way to go. Now, I don't know what Mike Brown thinks, but if he's going to try to turn Karl-Anthony Towns into a more dynamic passer and a more well-rounded, versatile offensive player, somewhat in the vein of Sabonis, I don't think that works if he's your 4. I think you need to have a true 5-out look. And I don't know if Cat can do all the things that Sabonis, like the Sabonis grab and go stuff, the passing off the move. He's a better playmaker than Towns. But I think Karl, especially from a standstill as a hub of an offense and delay, isolating at the nail, can do a lot of those things. But all those things that Sabonis did was predicated on the fact that he had so much space to operate in. So if you're going to try to use those principles, then I think Cat, for the vast majority of the game, has to be your 5. And to me, until we get clarity on that, it's a little bit of a question mark in terms of what is Mike Brown going to bring and pull from this offense, because that to me is the $64,000 question. How does he view Towns? Is he viable at the 5 defensively? If he thinks that, then offensively, this team should be pretty dynamic and borderline elite as like a baseline with maybe some room to grow.
$64,000 is hilarious, considering Mike Brown's probably going to make like $5 million, and the team is worth like $10 billion more.
It's a mid 2000s cultural talking point.
That's who wants to be a millionaire.
It doesn't have the
They're
same
all
impact.
Millionaires. Anyway, that's a great point. And until you just said it, I wasn't thinking in terms of Sabonis himself, who was dealing with this 4-5 toggling in his career when he got drafted to OKC. People forget this. OKC drafted Domantas Sabonis and made him into an exclusively a stretch 4, which didn't bring out any of his skills, which is like a weird kind of swing and a miss by OKC, but they turned it into Oladipo, which turned, I don't know, they figured it obviously worked out for them. Anyway, Sabonis goes to Indiana and breaks out, but even there, he's toggling between the 4 and the 5 with Miles Turner, and that was always a bit awkward. And Domantas Sabonis, the all-star, only really emerges in Sacramento. And why does it emerge? Because he's exclusively playing the 5. Like, Mike Brown decided the way for this team to thrive is to play this very undersized center, defensively challenged center, at center. And it totally changed their whole team, and the offense, took off from there. I would have to imagine that Mike Brown walked into the interview where he apparently impressed everybody and told management that has invested $1 gazillion in Karl-Anthony Towns that he's going to do a similar thing. It would shock me. It wouldn't shock me if he played with Mitch X amount of minutes a game. It wouldn't even necessarily shock me if he started with Mitch. I don't know if I'd go that direction, but it wouldn't shock me. But it would shock me if he didn't play 25 minutes a night minimum at center. And to try to bring out the best. Now, Sabonis, better playmaker, much better ball handler.
Yeah,
and a great, maybe the best screener in all of basketball. Like, he's strong as heck, and he sets monstrous screens, flips them, intuitive, smart, all the things that Cat sometimes is not. And look, on one hand, I'm always thinking Cat is who he is. We're a decade into his career. You're not going to fix the ills that befall that guy for all the incredible talent that he is, because the other element is that he's different from Sabonis, is that he's one of the best shooters in basketball, and Sabonis can't really shoot a 3. So you imagine if you could bring that style out to the 3-point line, because Sabonis is operating from the elbows. What does it mean if the guy who's running these sets is a threat to shoot it from 33?
Yeah, well, just on that point. So one of the actions that the Kings love, and this is the one that if you can, you guys Google this or YouTube it. It's like, I think it's a TNT segment where it's Sabonis and Fox, and they're breaking down their like unstoppable like 2-man game, and it's basically like a pistol 5 look where the ball gets immediately pitched to Sabonis, and then Fox is running into it. He can cut off Sabonis in either direction. They can run 2-man game. They can find cutters and shooters all over the floor. A lot of the ways teams ended up guarding that was just sagging off Sabonis to the point where it made it a little more difficult for them to get into that action cleaner, especially in the playoffs.
And there are no cutters, right?
And there's no cutters.
There's no cutters. Yeah.
Bingo. So if you're going to run similar things, and this is Cat from a standstill, you think he can maybe do some of this, but as you mentioned, one of the best shooting centers in the history of the NBA. So that's one way where you can try to develop the Brunson Cat 2-man game in ways that is more versatile and harder to manage. That gets back, of course, to how you construct the starting lineup to prevent teams from putting the wing on Cat. But I think if anything, you're going to see a more versatile, diverse playbook to get the best out of the Brunson Cat pairing, which we all of us consider to be a weak point from this past season with Tom Thibodeau. So if you can do that, because I hear so much talk now about how you have to stagger minutes with Brunson and Cat and try to, get the best out of them as individual playmakers and facilitators and scorers. But you need to, in my mind, to really be a championship team, they need to be great together offensively. And I think Mike Brown is probably as well equipped as any coach in the NBA, if you think about it, because he did it with Sabonis, he did it with Fox. Why can't he do something similar with Brunson and Towns? It feels like a pretty seamless transition to this current pairing after having a couple of years making those two an elite duo in Sacramento.
And look, we saw Towns do some of this stuff, especially early in the year, as a top of the key passer. Like the Knicks were a tremendously good cutting team off of Towns at the top of the key. That was maybe more valuable when centers were guarding Towns. But I also just thought the Knicks kind of went away from that stuff too often and just forgot about that element of their offense for large swaths of games, if not months. So I think Towns is very capable of that. Now, it's incumbent on Towns to not allow that to make him into a high turnover player, which he can be susceptible to. Because all the movement is lovely and great. You have to make sure that the negatives don't outweigh the positives. So he's got to be disciplined in the passes that he makes. He doesn't need to throw it behind his back. He doesn't need to throw it over his head. Just make the right passes. But yeah, but it does kind of parlay into this question about the lineups that he's going to play, and starting, I guess, with whether Cat starts at the 5 at all, but also, does he do everything in his power to force centers to guard Karl-Anthony Towns? And that would probably mean starting, I think the most obvious starter is Deuce, but Jordan Clarkson is out there. I don't think he wants to play a Clarkson-Brunson backcourt defensively to start games, but he did start a Fox-Monk backcourt to start games for, a lot of time. So maybe, Fox, Herter, and Monk sometimes? Maybe Monk came off the bench for a lot of that time too. So
they played a lot of minutes together.
Yeah, he wasn't afraid of going very small, and maybe with the defensively compromised center, right? He was like, you know what, screw it, let's just go with offense and win some games, and he successfully won a lot of games with them. And so I wonder if he considers that change with Deuce at the starting lineup. Sounds like maybe Mitch is more the conversation, which is totally different than what we're discussing. So yeah, thoughts on where he might go with those lineups, who he might play together. Because I imagine that this was also something that he talked about in his interview, was the lineups that Tibbs wasn't playing, I will play. I've played similar lineups. I know how to get the best out of them.
Yeah. I mean, if you were just using the Sacramento years as the prime example, it feels like a true 5-out look is just where he's going to go. And that has to, I think, would involve Deuce in the starting lineup. Now, it does get back to this style of offense he runs does require a lot of reading and reacting, flow, not necessarily a ton of play calling, but able to, just sort of read the game, and not in like a Tibbsian way, but where the game tells you what to do. But there's a certain pace. You mentioned paces at the top where, the quick decision making, the quick cutting, a lot of those things are not intuitive for most, or for a lot of NBA players. You're seeing that with like Kuminga in Golden State, who run a similar offense. Like that's always been like the issue with trying to fit him into that sort of offense. So I do wonder a little bit about like, listen, OG Anunoby's going to play 35 minutes a night, but I do wonder about him as a processor, how he fits in like what potential style of offense this would be. I don't know enough about Deuce McBride in that regard to have a great feel for that, but I just like to see that. I know Deuce as a spacer and as a shooter would certainly be effective, and that's why I think he would probably lean in that direction. But I think the offense might require more from these Knicks, and unfortunately, we haven't seen a lot of evidence that they can, and not to their fault at all. It's just what they've been dealing with. Can they do it? And can they flourish in that role?
I feel pretty confident about that. I think Mikal, is an extremely intuitive.
I have no issue with him. Yeah, he's going to be perfect in this offense.
But I think perfect is strong. Resident Mikal Bridges hater, say that's strong. It's only perfect if he takes an occasional layup.
Yes, but I think like his screening, cutting,
yes, 100%.
all that stuff. But I get your point. Perfect was too strong.
I think OG's a very good cutter. I think OG's a very good cutter when he senses an opportunity. Now, and I think that with a bit more flow, that may empower him. I think he can get stuck in corner duty and then kind of sulk in corner duty, and I imagine that this offense will have a little bit less of that, which I think will suit him psychologically, even as a player. But I think when he's engaged as a cutter, he's a very good cutter. And when he gets near the rim as a cutter, he finishes very well, as opposed to off the dribble, where I don't think he finishes very well. As a cutter into the lane, I think he does finish very well. And then Deuce, if you recall, had great chemistry with Isaiah Hartenstein.
Yeah, 100. Yeah,
even goes backdoors. It wasn't unlocked for him much. He with this iteration of the team, but maybe you can. I think he has it in him. I think he's also that kind of player that can kind of feel it. So yeah,
he's also a good screener as well. A really underrated screener. So I think that's a nice sort of feather in his cap. So yeah, I'm probably a little bit too strong in the skepticism there. It's just that we haven't seen a lot of it. So I'm just wondering how these current Knicks are going to sort of operate in an offense that may require a little more intuition, I guess.
Yeah. And, the other big elephant in the room is like, assuming the emphasis is going to be, and we're making a lot of assumptions here, assuming the emphasis is going to be on more ball movement, more player movement, 5-out type of offense, how willing is Jalen Brunson to play that way? I think there's two sides of the Brunson ball control conversation, because Tibbs certainly valued, and correctly so, that when Jalen Brunson has the ball a lot, you get shots on goal because he doesn't turn it over. And he's awesome at basketball. So there's a lot of value in Jalen Brunson controlling every possession. It works. The Knicks had a lot of success doing just that. What does it look like when he's less ball dominant? Can you get him off ball looks? That would be helpful. He's like one of the best shooters in the world. So I'd love to get him more off ball looks. How do you get those looks? Maybe it involves, we're going to talk about the free agents later. Maybe it involves Jordan Clarkson having the ball in certain lineups, a guy who could actually bend the defense and create some looks. But is Brunson willing to cede some possessions to Cat and play like the way Fox was with Sabonis, willing to kind of play off of Sabonis as opposed to the other way around? We'll see. That's going to be interesting. I don't think Brunson's too selfish to do it or anything. I just think Brunson plays a certain way, and he's had a ton of success a certain way. And it's hard to get guys to buy into something very different when you've had that much success. So that's something I'll be looking for. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's I think a real interesting question, and certainly something to track. I just posted it on X. You can look at my profile for it. But Jalen Brunson averaged about 6 dribbles per touch this past season. De'Aaron Fox, when he was with Sacramento was just around 4.5. So it doesn't feel like a big difference, but you know that it's a sizable gap. So can you sort of, and that's because Mike Brown would design actions with, as you said, Sabonis sort of being the fulcrum of that offense, to where Fox can sort of play off the ball, get an away screen, run into the catch, DHOs, it's just less burdensome offense that Fox had compared to what we've seen from Brunson over the past 3 years. So, you know, I even saw like Fox run like a traditional zoom action where he's flying out from the right corner to his left hand. Like, I'm like, all right, why that? We've seen Brunson that like gut Chicago coming up from the middle, but we haven't seen a lot of him in the right corner flying into.
And those gut Chicago actions, and for those who like don't know by now what that was, you'll be able to envision it. It's like when Brunson starts at the foul line, Mikal Bridges often would initiate those actions, or Josh Hart, and Brunson would work off of a screen at the foul line to catch the ball somewhere, theoretically with a step, so that he doesn't have to bring up the ball. But most of the time, he caught with very little advantage, if any at all, and he's working hard off the ball just to catch it. And now he has to kind of generate things anyway. So those actions were okay, but to your point, they didn't generate a lot of space. And if he's flying off a corner, or I think of the Halliburton action that Indiana killed the Knicks with, where it's kind of a get action, but it's off a stagger. So Halliburton would throw it 2 passes away. There'd be 2 screeners. It would be, let's say, Siakam and then Turner. He'd pitch it all the way to Turner and then burst off of the Siakam screen into a DHO with Turner going right. That's interesting stuff to me, where now Brunson is letting Cat create just a little advantage off a DHO. Now Cat has to set an actual screen and whatever we can get into, and not set an illegal screen, which God, he does a lot of. So there's a lot there, but yeah, I would love to see a little bit of that. And Fox and Brunson are very different. Fox is a much, much faster man. And part of it is also like whether Brunson's willing to play at a bit of a higher pace. And for that matter, whether Cat is, because Cat likes to trail things, as we know. He doesn't like to lead. He likes to trail.
That's a big piece of it. You know, we did see a little bit last year, and it was like when I say last year, this past season, bits and spurts of like Cat handling and then inverted screens for him to get downhill. You saw that a lot with Sacramento. I just wonder, I love it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost like the Knicks would run it, like Payne and McBride were usually the ones that would set those screens. I think just random action, not something that the coach is calling. But I wonder if you can empower Cat to do some actual grab and then just go. Like, see if you can, if there's more there as a ball handler than maybe he has gotten credit for. And I think there's, again, the balance of like, you empower him too much, then you get the negatives. And that's for Mike Brown to sort of like figure out that balance. But you know, that would maybe prevent Cat from always trying to trail the action, where you get the rebound, just like get into our stuff that we can like really fly into some like sets where the defense is not quite set. And maybe just put the pressure on Cat to move his body a little bit quicker with the ball in his hands. Maybe there's something there, but you know, the trail stuff should be, obviously you're not saying it shouldn't be part of his game, but you know, I think you can maybe get more out of it in some like true like delay action, where it felt like when the Knicks would not have the trail 3, they would sort of just like transition into whatever the secondary action was that maybe didn't involve Cat as the primary. But why can't Cat then just be your hub of the offense in that set if that trail 3 is not readily available? Like, he can certainly do that. And, you know, Clarkson was phenomenal running off DHOs last year in Utah. So I think that is like already a pairing where I can see that the Knicks having some real success in terms of a 2-man game, with Cat playing with some second units if Jordan Clarkson's coming off the bench. So I'm just really excited in general about like the possibility. And it's just feels very fresh, very new as just a fan and analyst of this basketball team to sort of dream and wonder about what is going to be there. And the other piece of it is like, this team is going to be, I think the pressure is going to be on them in practice. that they haven't felt in a while. Mike Brown gets on his players in a visceral and emotional way at times. And this team, I think, is going to need this training camp and this preseason to really sort of figure out whatever adjustments are going to have to be there. And they're going to be plentiful, but this is going to be a different sort of guy in the building for a lot of reasons. Some may be more player conducive, but also I think more accountable and holding these players more accountable in practice and maybe in games. So if Cat is really doing the stuff that we're all, frustrated with, will he hold Cat more accountable? Will he hold Josh Hart more accountable? Those are the things that I'm also curious about that are not necessarily X's and O's things, but maybe just a departure from what we saw from Tibbs over the past several years.
Yeah, it's funny. Zach Lowe on his podcast with, I don't know, Hollinger or Waz, whatever, said something about Brown is Tibbs-like in that he has hard practices and hard shoot-arounds. And I was like, no, that is not Tibbs. That maybe was Tibbs. That has not been Tibbs with the Knicks. They don't practice a lot. I don't get the sense that they're going through like long shoot-arounds. I think Tibbs adjusted to a veteran team and kind of trusted them to figure stuff out. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I maybe you saw some signs of the lack of practice time with this team. I think it's a fair thing to wonder about. And I don't think Brown will treat the Knicks average age of like 29 the way he treated that Sacramento team, average age of, let's say, 26. It is a different. You have to adjust to the age of your team. I don't think he'll be like. You don't see those like viral clips of him like in practice going at like Josh Hart. I don't see. I think that would be ill-advised. But
call him Gaudier, maybe Josh Hart.
Yeah. Right, but that's a good point. There are young guys on the team, but I don't think it'll be the same type of thing where he like totally re-energized and rejuvenated that whole franchise. But I think he will practice more. And for all the questions about Tibbs, whatever side you're on, or whether you're on both sides, there is something to the fact that coaches don't last in this league, and some of that is because organizations are impatient and sometimes irrational. Some of that is because coaches get stale. 5 years is a really long time. It is a lot of listening to the same guy for 5 years. And that voice, no matter who you are, can get stale. And Mike Brown is someone who's going to come in and be he is a very different personality. He is a much more gregarious personality than Tibbs, and he's going to come in and it's going to feel fresh, I think. And whatever you think of either of these guys as a coach, there's something valuable in that, in a fresh voice, in an energetic voice like his. I think that's a positive in and of itself potentially. So we'll see. It's going to be really interesting. But yeah, the excitement around having something new in the building is real. I feel it, and we'll see how much it translates once they get on the floor. Let's quickly talk about defense because we haven't touched on it yet, and then we'll transition into some of Yabusele and Clarkson talk. Yabusele and Clarkson, what a fascinating duo. Very large weight disparity. I keep thinking about that. It's like
it's about 100 pounds. It might be about 100
people. Like they're like 3 of Clarkson makes a Yabusele. What was I talking about? Oh, defense. Yeah. So your thoughts on Mike Brown's defensive chops? What you expect to see, what you've seen from his teams, etc.
Yeah, well, he was defensive guy in Golden State, and those defenses were great a lot of the times. Was more known as a defensive coach prior to his Sacramento years. So, listen, the Sabonis experience is going to be very valuable because it was obviously you're not going to play Sabonis in a deep drop. You're going to play him more aggressively. I think there's going to have to be some of that with Cat. We've talked about this ad nauseum. I know this is like the 100th time we've mentioned, the Cat defensive pick and roll stuff, but having a coach willing to play him more aggressively. I don't know off the top of my head how much zone they played. I should have probably had that before we went on. I'll try to get it and post it on the timeline, but I assume there will be more of that at the Knicks' disposal. Just having that look, you talked about that many times last year. The fact that the Knicks never went to that was one of the biggest unforced errors of the Thibodeau experience, especially this past season. So more versatility, I think, is going to be key for this ball club. They're going to have now. I know we're not getting into the guys they signed, but they have brought in two guys that are offense first. We know Cat, we know Brunson. The question I have is, even if you can boost this offense to a higher level, which I think is a fair prediction to make, can you build an average defense with the group? Now, that might be an easy yes, and maybe it is. And now can you get yourself to believe this can be a borderline top 10 defense? I think that's when it gets to me a little more pie in the sky. NBA is changing all the time. And you may not need necessarily a good defense, borderline top 10, maybe, above average defense to win a championship, but I still feel like you might have to. And that's where I think the biggest test will be for Mike Brown is, can you take these players, a lot of frankly subpar, if not bad defenders, with a lot of really good ones and sprinkled in, and that's key. Can you build a good defense out of this? And I think that is where I think most of my skepticism lies about this thing being a true championship caliber team. And that's the biggest question that I have. Other than the Cat, what do you want to do with him as you're in the starting lineup? Is he your 5? Is he your 4? Is how can you build a good defense with the group he has?
So per a tweet by an account called Sportscasting NBA, which has 863 followers. So obviously an authority on the subject. But this sounds legit, so I'm going to believe him. He said, the new look Kings defense toggled to zone more often than before Mike Brown's firing. This was on January 25th, 25, so shortly after his firing. Up from 2.29 possessions per game to 3.25 possessions per game under Christie. So it sounds like they played a little bit of zone under Mike Brown, and I do recall them, at least it was in the playbook. So I'd like to see some of it, yeah. And to me, the idea that he was just a versatile defensive coach. Sabonis playing blitz. Now, I actually thought at times he was too stubborn with Sabonis playing blitz defense. I can recall Knicks games where Josh Hart had like the best games of his career, just absolutely carving up that defense over and over again, and he never came out of it. So that was interesting to me, but at least the idea that he played that way is good. I think you'll see a little bit of zone. What he didn't have in Sacramento, that he does have in New York, is the luxury of defensive wings. Like, as Keegan Murray is a good defender, has developed into a very good defender under Mike Brown. But after that, there was nothing there on the wing defensively. And
Harrison Barnes, solid, but not a
Harrison Barnes. It's very, very hard to play that aggressive with your center without the protection behind. How does that look if they do play that way? With OG and Mikal Bridges behind, or Mitchell Robinson behind, or whoever, however they end up lining up. I think you'll see more aggressive Cat defense if he can get Cat there. Now, again, I think some of the Cat drop was not Tibbs saying Cat should drop. It was Cat not getting up when he was supposed to. That's been an issue for 10 years. Is Mike Brown going to be the voice that gets Cat up on the screens when he's supposed to be up on the screens? I don't know. That's a challenge. We'll see. But I do think you will see a more versatile defensive coach. I think you will see different looks than we've seen. I wonder if he'll toggle matchups a bit more and put OG on 5s. You don't want to do that too much in regular season, I don't think, just because OG just had a really healthy year, and you just want that. That's what you want, is a healthy OG year. But certainly something they should look at. And then ball pressure wise, like, is he going to have Mikal Bridges on the ball? again, it goes back to who starts, but I think Deuce McBride, like the way he kind of employed Keon Ellis at times as just like a ball pressure hawk when Keon Ellis played. I wonder if that's the vision for Deuce McBride. So we'll see, but I'm excited to see on both sides of the ball, really, because I do think sprucing up the offense the ways we talked about, and then diversifying the defense in the ways we talked about, that's the reason you make the move, right? Is to try to do those two things. And if they can, and if Mike Brown can do it, it'll be a really fun team to watch next year. Now, on that team are two new fellas. Let's start with Jordan Clarkson. He was the first signing. I know that you've already looked at a lot of the tape. I've really just started kind of diving into the tape, but I'm very familiar with Jordan Clarkson. He's been in the league a long time already. I guess let me ask it this way. Before we get into what Clarkson does well and not well, do you see a common thread here between Clarkson and Yabusele? Is there a vision, or were these just the two best players at the price points that they could get them? What do you think in terms of like what the front office was thinking here?
It's good question. I haven't thought about it in that context. Listen, the easy one is like, I think both are, defensively challenged for different reasons, but offensively, I think there's a versatility that both of them have that should buoy any offense. If you look at Clarkson, even with a group in Utah that this past season a lot of Isaiah Collier minutes, Filipowski, Markkanen really not having a great offensive season. Like there just wasn't a lot going on there. Yet when he was on the court, like he made their offense just perform better. Even if like shots weren't going in, like he was creating a lot of looks for players. And a lot of those players, whether it's Keontae George or I mentioned Collier, who wouldn't even shoot the ball sometimes off Clarkson penetration and kicks, he was creating a lot of offense for them. And even at 33 years old, has an ability with his balance and his, I mentioned the DHO stuff. He's not a guy you want to isolate and just break down a defense consistently, because I don't think he can do it consistently now at his age. But you can give him a little bit of a runway, can get in the teeth of the defense, and can make not every pass, but he can make a skip pass. He can read a tag defender and know where the pass needs to be. He can do a lot of those things. His passing, to me, not always the most willing passer. Mike Breen famously was apoplectic last time he was at MSG over some of the shots he was taking. But when he is sort of, I think, engaged in the right way, and that again, that I can't reiterate it enough, that Utah situation was bad. So you put him in a winning situation, and as a tertiary creator, maybe a guy that you even like be a pseudo point guard for your team every now and again, he can make a lot of reads and a lot of passes, and he's a really dynamic shot maker as well. And I think Yabusele has similar attributes as a big in terms of like what you can do with him. Like he can post up smalls. He's obviously a good catch and shoot player from above the break. That's a weakness for this team, and he's going to help that. And as a driver is excellent. So I think they went two guys that for the price point are as bad as versatile and effective scoring and creating offense as you can find, but are going to have major trade-offs on the defensive end. So maybe that's the thread that both of them have and what this front office was trying to look at.
Yeah, I like it. I am still pretty shocked that Jordan Clarkson went for the minimum. And I understand the flaws, and I almost feel like it was a result of being on an absolutely crappy team that was really trying to lose hard. And even when they started to win for a couple of years, they ensured that they started to lose by pulling all their players. That's really tough for a veteran who's been in the league now 10 years. I mean, some of it is his tendencies. There's no question. And maybe the biggest question to me is like, this is, I think, the best team he's ever been on. Is it close?
I'll look for a second. Yeah, I don't. I think I would imagine you're right, but let me just double check while you're talking.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the best team he's been on. So to what extent can he skew his game towards the stuff you're talking about? Because he does have that passing in him. Like it when you watch him, it's funny. He has this reputation as like a gunner. It's like Lou Williams, I think, was the same way. A reputation as like a total gunner, but was like a genius pick and roll player as a passer too. Like excellent. You can't do it as just a gunner, like to be as successful. Like these guys can pass the ball, and can Clarkson lean into those parts of his game? I still do assume, because if I'm Mike Brown, I'm looking at the way that second unit played last year, and I want that. That's the best the Knicks looked all the time. It was with Cat playing with the second unit, and I am trying to replicate that with Jordan Clarkson and Cat together. But does Clarkson defer enough to Cat? Is he looking for him on the pops? I think he will. Like he did it with Markkanen. Like I think he will try to seek Cat out for threes, and it's just a matter of like eliminating the bad stuff. Like we don't need the really crazy pull up threes. We don't need the difficult floaters over centers. Like just find the next play. What stands out to me though, watching him is, and something Knicks, Clarkson gets into the lane so easily. Like he's so shifty, and I was watching a game where he comes off pick and roll, and the center's in drop, and somehow he ends up not shooting over the center, but he actually gets around the center and takes a layup from the other side. Like he actually somehow got all the way around. Like the Knicks didn't have guys that did that. Like nobody gets to the rim on this team. Brunson, he's so good at short floaters that it actually doesn't matter. Like I mean it doesn't matter, but he doesn't get all the way to the rim. Like Clarkson's ability to actually break down a defense is like unique on this team.
Yeah, and he's well balanced too. Like he's always he's even though he's only 170 pounds, like he just has his core is strong enough to where he can play off too, and he's very rarely knocked off balance, and that's a key advantage that he has on those drives. And just real quick, so we can put a bow on it, Utah, when they were the number 1 seed in 2021, he won the 6th man that year. So I don't know if that team is better than the Knicks, but that was a good team. Yeah, and he obviously helped them a lot.
And that was with Conley and Mitchell?
I believe so, yeah.
So did he probably played off one of those guys even with second units, but he was the 6th man. That's pretty cool. I kind of forgot about that. Speaking of which, mistakes that I've made tonight, I did say that the OKC traded Sabonis for Oladipo. False, wrong, dumb. They actually traded Sabonis and Oladipo, I think, for Paul George, which then might or may not have turned into the MVP of the league that just won a championship. So good call by me. Always criticizing OKC incorrectly because they just do everything right. Awesome. Good job. Anyway, that's putting a bow on Jordan Clarkson. Yeah. And the question for Clarkson, like maybe the biggest question, is how much does he play with Brunson and how does that look? Because I think offensively that would be freaking awesome. I think that would be like awesome. It's just like, can they hold up? And watching a bit of Utah now, he's pretty exclusively on like the worst wing, which is Brunson's job to guard the worst wing. And I don't know where Clarkson kind of goes against certain lineups, certainly against starting caliber lineups, because he has to guard someone else. And that scares me a little bit. But I think Mike Brown's going to try it. And I'm excited to watch that because, again, Clarkson might be able to create some threes for Jalen Brunson, which he doesn't get any of.
100%. And maybe that's when you lean into your zone looks, because Utah ran a fair amount of zone over the past few years.
Get Cat out with those lineups. Get Mitch in to anchor the zone.
Yeah,
and then maybe that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was funny. I was watching. We could transition to Yabusele. Watching a little bit today, the Sixers would run zone with him as the 5 in the middle, and that was as bad as you can get. Like there's times where, and that was obviously no Embiid. That team had no one to play the 5s, but Nick Nurse. How do you say his name? Why am
Nick Nurse? No, Nick Nurse. That's right.
Nurse or Nurse? Nurch.
Are you kidding?
No, I'm like losing my mind.
It's like the word nurse, like a doctor's nurse, like a nurse.
Nurse?
Yes.
Why am I saying Nurch?
I don't know. I don't know why you're saying that.
I'm just going to go on record. It's now Nick Nurch going forward.
Nurch.
Okay. Yes, Nick Nurch.
Anyway, yeah, they had no bigs, and Yabusele was the center in the middle of the zone. That was not great. But that man can do some things offensively. He's a big man that has good feet and is legitimately a terrifying player to see coming downhill against you.
LeBron James knows it.
Yep, LeBron James does know that. And there's been a few players that have sort of taken maybe that cue and not wanted to get on the poster the next time, although he does play below the rim for the most part. Like his athleticism is one of those interesting things because as a 5, it was very clear how ground bound he was. Playing off 2 feet as a leaper just seemed to be a struggle for him. But when you can give him
off of.
a lot, 260 pounds.
A lot of pounds to get up there. Although only Zion Williamson can lift that kind of weight up in the air.
For real. Although I did see a video of Yabusele working out recently. Looked like he may have shed a few. I'm just going to put that out there. He might be a little bit. He might be just cutting weight a little bit as he hits 30 years old. I think it might extend his career. Could be a good move by him. Anyway, but when you can give him a runway downhill, and when he can go off 1 foot, there's more athleticism than I think most think he has. The question I think is like, how do the Knicks envision him? Because he's got wing skills. Is he more effective as a 4 defensively? But then you don't get maybe the advantages on the offensive end with him attacking closeouts against a 4 versus a 5, where he's just a lot to handle. So I think that's where, like anything here, we have to sort of project and predict what Mike Brown's going to do. But I think he's a versatile offensive player, and at that number the Knicks got him, you can't say anything other than that's a very valuable contract. And assuming he can carry over the shooting, he's going to be very effective for them.
Yeah, I would say I'm slightly less confident in Yabusele becoming like a consistently good rotation player than I am in Clarkson because of what you just said. Is like I think a lot of his value comes from playing that small ball 5, and I think basically the bet is Mitch isn't playing 82, and I think he will have ample opportunity to play the 5. Whether it's when Cat gets dinged up, hopefully not seriously for games, and Mitch is not gonna miss some games, and so maybe Yabu gets those minutes at the 5, and that's where his contribution really comes. Not that he can't play at the 4 and be effective, but I think the value is really in the pick and pop game at the 5, and then he can kind of fill that delay role as the DHO guy, and he's good at that stuff and a screener and man, I watched a shot, DJ, and you're the doctor of jump shots. I watched a shot. I don't really understand quite how he shot 40%, but
there's a lot going on there.
I guess he did. Did. I'm a little worried that might not happen again, but
so you're talking about like it's a heave. It's a heave. It's not how you would necessarily teach it. It's a 2-motion shot. So where like he comes to a set point above his head, like far, if he's shooting above the break, he even brings it back farther behind his head. There's a pause, and then it's the forward motion. It's almost like almost Luka-esque in terms of like how he shoots it. And there's just a lot of moving parts. And I think for any shooter that shoots that way, and you see Luka and LeBron, 2 very distinct 2-motion shooters, can go into these shooting ruts sometimes. So that's always going to be, I think, the concern with the guys like that. But the touch feels real, especially around the rim. And I think you can maybe take some solace in that. Like his finishing shot 71% at the rim. A lot of those were layups. He uses his body well, but he also has really good touch there. So the touch feels like it's a real thing that can carry over. But yeah, I think it would be maybe a mistake to assume he's going to be a 40% 3-point shooter again, or whatever he was. I think that's a fair question. If it dips to 35-34%, it's a different player.
Right. Exactly.
So I hope it carries over. Yeah.
I mean, we'll see. I think he'll help. I think he'll definitely help situationally, depending on where he's playing. But look, there's no question they did well. It's interesting that they got two guys from like really crappy situations last year, and I feel like there's a bump in just play. I mean, Yabusele's playing for his career. Like he's going to be as motivated as anybody. He just got back into the NBA after a long hiatus, so I don't think he wasn't playing hard. Clarkson, I think there's probably just an energy bump and an effort bump that'll come playing serious basketball again. It's been really interesting to see Yabusele now play in like a serious NBA environment, and I think it's going to be fun to watch. All right, I think Andrew Claudio is here representing what is normally the chat to ask us some questions, but since we're recording this at
11:30 Eastern.
We don't have a chat. Although I think we would have gotten hundreds of super chats at 11:30 at night, but Andrew didn't believe us. So he's here to represent the crowd and ask us their questions. So Andrew, what do you got for us, buddy?
So I teased it to you guys that this is going to be like the Tony Reale segment, where at the end of Pardon Interruption, where I come in with my corrections. But you read the Paul George correction already, and you read the Utah was a 1 seed when Jordan Clarkson won 6th Man of the Year correction already. So that segment has officially ended.
You taught me how to say Nick Nurse's name, so you got me.
And I did teach you how to say Nick Nurse.
Yeah,
that's right. Shout out to Nick Nurse.
It's also it's a word, DJ. Like his last name is a word.
It is
the English language.
Yeah.
Like what is? It's actually easier than anyone else's last name.
Listen, it's been a long day.
It's like Brown and Nurse are 2 words. Do you struggle to say Thibodeau? Because that's a weird one, and you say it perfectly.
I sometimes say Thibodeau, so I screw that one up too.
It actually is technically Thibodeau.
I think you're right that it is Thibodeau, that we just said Tibbs for the longest time, or Thibodeau for the longest time. Okay, so we do have some super chats that came in while you guys were doing this. So shout out to everybody for watching live and for the contributions. We start with this super chat from @DefNotMacri67. Hi guys, what Tibbs principle will you personally miss or think the team will potentially miss under Mike Brown?
Thank you, Jeff Not Macri, for your generous contribution. You are not a psychopath. You are a normal guy.
Totally.
So, one thing I forgot to mention that this question brings up in my mind is I like how Mike Brown does have little tips in him, because I think it is extremely valuable to maintain some of the culture that you built with the guy that you're bringing in, but also add something. And I think Mike Brown is going to expect effort. He's going to be well prepared. He's going to preach ball control, even though it's going to maybe come in a different way. There's going to be more risk taking, but I do think he's going to preach ball control, rebounding, not fouling. Like the building blocks will remain in place, but he's just going to build the tower taller, as it were. That's the hope. So I like that he has some Tibbsness in him. What I think they might miss from Tibbs is, well, depending on how things go anyway, the obsession with the possession battle. Now, there's a risk reward there. You're hoping you reap more rewards than the risks. But I think if there's anything in the NBA discourse world that is underestimated, it's not turning the ball over. I think players are overvalued and undervalued based on whether they do or don't turn the ball over to a large extent. I'll give you a perfect example. There was a lot of talk over the Detroit series about who was the better player between Cade and Brunson. And Cade had some amazing moments. Cade turned the ball over like 6 times a game. And it can't be overstated how damaging that is. Like, it's not just that you turn the ball over. It's that it often turns into other points for the team. So you're giving teams points when you have a very good half-court defense and Knicks are struggling to score. And it's not a shot on goal. Like, that in of itself is a massive difference. Like, ball movement is such an easy thing to love And not turning the ball over is such an easy thing not to notice. But one's not necessarily more valuable than the other, right? And so I believe that more ball movement, player movement can raise the ceiling for this team. It also can lower the floor. And that's the risk. So can you find that balance? That's the Tibbs part that I think you might miss. I hope you don't miss, but you might miss.
Yeah, and the other thing is like even when the Knicks would turn it over, to your point, Benji, they were always very low with live ball turnovers. Like they would have bad passes that would go out of bounds a lot, travels or anything that would stop the game is just not going to be as damaging as when you're going to have live ball turnovers, which the Knicks under Tibbs avoided, I think, as well as any team consistently over the 5 years. I just think the fouling, while also being an aggressive, for the most part, good defensive team, is probably the one principle that I think was the most maybe underrated but effective thing that Tibbs preached. And I agree with you that Mike Brown is going to preach those same things, but I do think there is like maybe a difference with the obsessive nature of Tibbs in that regard. Like he would go routinely into press conferences, and Benji, you watch all the press conferences. How many times would he say after they had I think he thinks a bad whistle, we're a low foul team. They got whatever, how many free throw, we're a low foul team. So that was a badge of honor for him. But it didn't seem like, for the most part, maybe last year it turned a little bit to the other side where maybe the lack of fouls was more, a bit of a negative, but it never felt like they were sacrificing the aggression and the ability to just stay in front of your man and defend with a high level of intensity while also being a low foul team. Like that's a pretty fine line to have to try to straddle. And he did that, I think, as well as any coach over a sustained period. I hope Mike Brown can replicate that, but I think that's going to be tough for him with this team.
I'll say one more thing, sorry, and then we can move on. But we talked about Mike Brown being the presence that he can handle the media. He's dealt with big markets. He's dealt with big personalities. At late stage in Sacramento, he kind of lost his cool a few times in press rooms, including the famous possession after possession after possession after possession, which is an amazing soundbite, but it's also not something that'll go over well here. It's just like the press conference can never be the story in New York. It should never be, and it can never be. And when it is, it becomes an insufferable topic for the next week and a half. So like, he's a big personality, Mike Brown. Tibbs was a master at saying the same exact stupid things that drove you crazy in every press conference, but there's something tremendously valuable in that this never becomes the focus. It's just the game tells you what to do. We're a low foul team. Once in a while he goes to the refs, but like otherwise it is a lot of nothing. And I think it would behoove Mike Brown to adopt that approach just because there are enough issues. Like you don't need to add like press conference drama to it.
That's mine, by the way. The fact that like you guys hit on the X's and O's principles, and I agree with you. The fact that nothing Tibbs ever said ever became a headline was like my thing. I knew I never had to worry about, and I'd look at coach here, coach there, and it's like I wouldn't have said that. That now becomes a topic, and
right.
I'm now curious what this will happen with someone, to your point, that will absolutely say what's on his mind if he feels the need.
And by the way, never gets crazy. Like he's always super intense on the bench, but never goes at really ref like a crazy person. Never goes at a player like a crazy person on the floor. And I don't think Mike Brown does a lot of that, but there's just a little more there that can become a story. So we'll see.
So some of the clips going out today of Mike Brown getting ejected from games, being held back by players. I'm excited for those because those will be fun to watch. Tibbs has never been ejected from a game.
Yeah, because he just says, Jesus Christ.
Right. He just yells and then goes back to coaching. I'm not going to let someone else coach this team. I'm going to make sure I'm
just goes
in the coach. That's the other thing I'm going to miss is doing the impressions. Exactly.
What's
up?
The handshakes? The handshake.
Oh, the handshaking.
During
that's right.
Because he's a total freak. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
What's he going to do?
I'm pretty sure he's watching.
Did you hear him?
Right now.
So Taj Gibson I forget where he was interviewed. There's a clip going around. Right after Tibbs got fired, and he's like, "Yeah, I talked to Tibbs. He's doing all right, but he's like, man, I got to get a job. And Taj is like, man, you got to relax. And Tibbs, I need a job. I'm like, that is exactly the reaction I would assume he would have had. Like he needs
I don't know what
a job.
I don't know what the Washington Wizards are doing. He should be that coach now, today. I'm not kidding.
You said it. That also will help their pick. If the Knicks can get a first round pick this year because he coaches them to a play-in team.
I guess they don't want to win games, which is why he's not their coach. But any like really rebuilding team should bring look. The proof is in what the Knicks have become in 5 years. Like he will do that for you.
Bingo. Glad we could wax poetic about Tibbs a little bit. This next one is from @AllOfKnicks Twitter 25.
Oh wow.
Hey fellas, what's the thing you're most excited to see now that you'd never got to see under Tibbs?
Well, baldness.
Like someone who actually accepted the reality of their hairline. Right. You're saying
Mike Brown's accepted it for a decade plus now, man. He is as bald as they come. Tibbs' hair was one of the underrated stories of the last 5 years. What a wild transition.
Well, the beard was a clutch. I mean, you got to give him credit for that. Like the fact that the beard was such. I look at pictures of him like at his opening press conference with the Knicks, the Zoom call, and like first year or 2 years he had the no beard. What a move!
It was a great move. Whatever he did. Whatever he took,
little supplements just for men.
Dude, late in road trips, it would get gray, and then when he got home again, it would be fresh and beautiful.
It would almost have like a red hue to it. It was nice.
It's just so funny. It's so funny thinking about Tibbs like going to whoever he went to and being like, "I need the hair, I need the brown back." What is he like with his barber?
Mm-hmm. Is there a basketball thing that you will be excited to see now under Mike Brown that you never got to see under Tom Thibodeau?
Well, listen, we never got to see the true 5-out stuff. I mean, that's like the easy one, but I feel like I think it's safe to assume that's the most likely way that Mike Brown's going to go about trying to build his offense. Considering what he did in Sacramento and around Sabonis, I think it's fair to think that he's going to go that route here. He's got a player in Deuce McBride that can slide right into that unit, and we'll know for sure. And it'll also be interesting to see like the functionality of that group and how well it holds up defensively. It's just going to be very interesting. I'm assuming even if it's not a starting lineup, we're going to see a lot of it. And I think it's very interesting to see that group with the Mike Brown motion second side, like get the ball moving, player movement going. I'm just looking forward to that.
Yeah. We talked about a lot of it already. Versatility in 3 different ways. One, defensive versatility. We talked about different schemes. 2, offensive versatility. More of a less of a ball control offense, more of a movement offense. 3, lineup versatility. Maybe most importantly, lineup versatility. Playing smalls together, playing bigs together, both of those things. Playing no bigs at all. That's Yabusele, OG front lines, whatever, man. Like what the game calls for, different ideas. Let's get a look at a lot of different things. Just a bit more of experimental coaching in the regular season. That's the stuff I'm excited for because that's for all that. That's the wart with Tibbs, and it was maybe most pronounced this year. And I think that's probably why he got fired. So the idea of a more versatile coach coming in and changing up that stuff is exciting.
Yeah, and the other last thing is like I don't think multiple of those rookies from last season are going to play meaningful minutes, but if we can get one in the rotation as like the 9th, 10th, whether it's I think you can make an argument for Huck Porty, Dadier, and Kolek as maybe figuring out a way to carve some minutes. I think Huck Porty probably has the easiest avenue because of potential injuries at the center for some real minutes, but I would love to see one of those guys. I think all have talent and all I can see maybe carving out a career as a NBA rotation player. We'll love to see one of them get real minutes this year.
So you hinted at mine, DJ. This has been a part of the conversations I've had over the last month since Tibbs was no longer the head coach, is that in every situation about the team, when it was, should the Knicks do this? Should the Knicks get this guy? Could they do this? It was always, well, Tibbs will never. And now the flexibility of, well, now maybe this coach will. And that leads to some of the younger players that Tibbs will never play Tyler Kolek, even if Jalen Brunson goes down. And campaign, like it took campaign, Deuce, and Jalen Brunson going down before you finally saw Tyler Kolek, because DeLon Wright had to start. Like that, I think potentially Taylor Jenkins opened my mind a little bit more to that possibility, because I thought we'd see all three of the sophomores playing in the rotation, in a 13-man rotation. But that does lead to our final super chat from Ronald M. Boss. Shout out to the very generous contribution from Ronald M. Boss. BTB and DOJ, first time, long time. Is it fair and reasonable to say that none of our young legends, Kolek, Hukporti, Dadier, have a path to a rotation spot outside of an injury? Do you think this is a good or bad thing? Hashtag 53 wins. Hashtag the chip.
That is channeling of our friend Ronald M. Boss in a way.
Yeah.
That's really well done. It's like you've seen a few super chats from him in your life.
Yes.
Okay, so what's the rotation? So you have the last year's starting five will all be in the rotation. Deuce McBride will be in the rotation. Jordan Clarkson will be in the rotation. That's 7.
Mitch.
After that, Mitch will be in the rotation.
Yabusele.
That's 8. I'm
Yabusele.
pretty confident because they just use so that's 9. You could play 10. And so where is that 10th person playing? I don't think to start it would be Hukporti, assuming the health of all the first 9, because you have 2 centers and a hybrid center power forward. And if you want to call Cat a hybrid power forward center, but you have a true center and then 2 hybrids. You don't need Hukporti. Most naturally would be the wing, I think. Now, is Dadier ready for that? I have no idea. But showed some flashes last year, can defend, can seem to shoot the 3. In terms of like upside, you talk about the size of the wing, how young he is, should be growing leaps and bounds year over year right now. Like this is a tremendous growth time for his career, whereas Kolek's like an older rookie. I think you got a sense of kind of who he is and who he can be. I think Kolek. Dadier is kind of a blank slate. So
yeah, but it doesn't go back to like the collaboration with the front office. Like, what do they think about those 3? And the fact that they gave Kolek the richest second round contract, was it in history at that point?
Mm-hmm. In history.
So do they view him as someone, like, was that part of the conversation of like, all right, here's the directive in terms of like who we, maybe directive's too strong a word, but this is the priority of what we want from these 3 guys. Here's who we want to prioritize. Kolek is 24 years old now.
Yeah, look,
he's quickly going to be up for unrestricted, not restricted free agency, like sooner than you think. So I think I do want to see what I have in him. I think pretty early on, but you're right; it's not a clean avenue for him as an undersized point guard.
But to your point, like Mike Brown, I mean, Sacramento, Mike Brown played a lot of small guys together. The Knicks happen to have a lot of small guys. Like Deuce doesn't play that small, but he's kind of small. Brunson, Clarkson. You add Clarkson to the mix, like that specific player, choosing to sign that player with the minimum, I think made the Kolek situation just more difficult. He's obviously just a ball handler and a small one at that. But I think he could be the 10th man to start the season. You play Kolek, Clarkson, who else? Wing X, Ogier, McHale, and Cat in your second unit, basically. Yabusele maybe gets in there with that group or with the starters. I don't know exactly how they'll stagger it, but that's interesting to me.
Well, so the other part of this is that we're so used to the hockey shifts, and more specifically the hockey shifts being very lengthy. Like you might see some 30-minute OG Anunoby games, some not playing back to back. from OG or Hart. So that's the other way for these kids to play
by the
more.
way, that's such a great point, Andrew. And that is how most coaches get looks at guys, even if they're not in the rotation, but like they're going to play once or twice a week based on the way. I mean, yeah, injuries happen, and then also, yeah, maybe Cat or OG sit second night of. I mean, not that Tibbs never did that, but he rarely did it. And when guys played, they played 40 minutes. And so everyone except Brunson, basically. And so it's a good point. There are just more minutes to go around, both games to go around and minutes within games to go around. That's an exciting part of it. I hadn't really thought about that in terms of getting a look at the young fellas. But there's no question you will get more of a look at them, I think, this year than you did last year.
Thank you, Ronald. And that'll do it for this edition of KFS X's and O's. I will let you guys sign off, as I very much enjoyed this episode of KFS X's and O's. Thank you for staying up.
I'm surprised.
No, I just was like very happy that you guys found the time to do this.
You're just happy that the Mets finally won a game.
Yes, finally. And
Zach Lowe is your friend.
Yes, and Zach Lowe is also a Mets fan that commiserates with me when they go 3-14.
Was that the first response to you that he's put out there on the ether?
And it was unprovoked. I didn't tweet about the Mets. I tweeted about my thoughts on Mike Brown, and then he said, "Yes, but does
he follow you?
Well, are the Mets cooked?" Yeah, but don't
say yes. I just follow me.
So I just, I guess, sorry, I don't know what to say.
No,
yes, he follows me, but I'm
not upset about it. Do I look upset about it?
I will go DM him tonight and say follow Benjy. How's that? And DJ, in case he's not.
I would appreciate that. You know what?
DJ either. Okay.
He's not.
But yes, my good friend Zach Lowe that we've interacted all of twice on Friend of the Pod. That's right. I tweeted my thoughts about Mike Brown, and he replied, "Yes, but are the Mets cooked, Andrew?" And I didn't have the reaction of like, "Oh my gosh, Zach Lowe tweeted at me." It was, "Yes, they're cooked, but I don't want to think about that. Leave me alone."
Is he a Mets therapy follower?
That's what I think. I do think he checks out Mets therapy. I also think he might check out Sam Vecini and like that game theory. And there's been many a time, because Sam Vecini is a baseball fan, that baseball talk has been allowed on the show, and I've gotten a few Mets therapy sessions in.
I got you. Yeah, yes. Nice. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you for tuning in. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a 5-star rating wherever you are listening to this episode. Follow us on socials, you schmendricks. Follow us, Nick Nurch. Follow us, Zach Lowe. Follow us. We do good work here. We know things, and we talk about them with intelligence and integrity. Right, DJ?
A lot of integrity.
Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy July 4th weekend, my friends. All of you out there, all you Patriots out there, enjoy your July 4th. Watch some electric New York baseball. Both teams just thriving out there. Very exciting stuff. And look, more to come from both DJ and from me in terms of the coach, in terms of the new players, how that's all going to work.
Hey, Summer League around the corner.
Damn, Summer League around the corner, which I may or may not be attending.
It's like 9 days away.
Is it really? I better decide if I'm attending.
It's next weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's not.
No, it's next week, actually. It's next week. That's right. It technically starts on Wednesday, but Wednesday is also my wedding anniversary, so you better believe I'm not going to that start of Summer League, but I'll be in Vegas starting Friday.
All right, friends. Thanks all for your
Benjy's stressed now.
And attention.
Sorry. It has nothing to do with the Yankees.
Oh, those stink. And have a great night. Talk to you soon.
See ya.